Dr. Steve Collins, thank you so much for joining us on Social Church. How do we know that Sodom is a real place?
Well, that's a really, really good question, because there are, in fact, a lot of people, a lot of scholars in the world who say that these cities never existed at all.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and by the way, I'm going to state this, and then but I'm going to preface it by saying I've never had anybody come forward and disprove this to me.
Yeah.
Because if you look at all the ancient Near Eastern writers, all the ancient Near Eastern storytellers, doesn't matter who they are, whether they're Hittites or whether they're Babylonians or Egyptians or whether they're in the Bible.
Yeah.
Ancient writers never invent fictitious geography.
Wow.
And that's a huge point, because in the ancient world, whether the stories they tell are fact or fiction, the fact of the matter is that they layer those stories over a real world geography. And so every place the places that are mentioned, and by the way, this has always turned out to be true, even places that some people thought were mythical, turned out to be actual. And I think that's just true. Ancient people don't have a concept of like 5 Acre Wood or Middle Earth. They don't make up fictitious places.
Yeah.
So they layer their stories over a real world geography, and that's one of the reasons why I know that Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain are in fact real places.
Brilliant.
Now I know that from archaeology now. But before we started, at the very beginning of our search, we knew going in that the ancient writers, including the writer of the Book of Genesis, was not leading us astray geographically.
Brilliant. So before we peak too soon, tell us a little bit about why Sodom's a special place for you. You've obviously been working on a project for a while. Tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Collins.
Yeah, a while, like a third of my life.
Yeah.
I started pondering this whole thing back in about 1996.
Yeah, wow.
When by the way, I used to take people on tours to the Holy Land. And I used to take them to the southern sites, Bab el-Mandeb, Numair, the typical traditional sites at the south end of the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
I used to take people down there and tell them it was Sodom. The problem is, one day I finally really read the scriptures carefully.
Yeah.
And when I read the Book of Genesis carefully, I came away with the conclusion that there was no way that the geography of the text took us toward the south end of the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
Everything about that geography took us toward the north end of the Dead Sea, and that led me to start thinking, researching in another direction. I don't care where Sodom is, and a lot of people have accused me of that. Well, Collins discovered this big Bronze Age site, and he's trying to make it into Sodom. Now that couldn't be the furthest from the truth.
Yeah.
The fact is that I started with the text.
Yeah.
With the text that provided the geography, that provided the map, the location of Sodom.
Yeah.
We simply followed the text.
Yeah.
The text took us to the north of the Dead Sea, east of the Dead Sea, exactly where the Bible says it should be. And frankly, it was no real surprise to me that they are actually there, and they're there in a big way. I mean, we're not talking about. I mean, some people have talked about finding sulfur balls or things like that in various places around the Dead Sea, which is poppycock.
Yeah.
We actually have cities. In fact, Sodom, we now know, el-Hammam is the site that we've been excavating for 15 years. We now know it is the largest continuously occupied Bronze Age city in the whole southern Levant.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
Which is why it makes the headlines in Genesis chapter 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's listed in the same chapter with Babylon and Uruk and Nineveh and Akkad.
Yeah.
So it's mentioned among the biggest cities of the ancient world, and in fact, this particular civilization is the greatest single population center in the southern Levant during the whole of the Bronze Age.
Wow. We get a verbal map, don't we, in Genesis 13. Has that been consistent with your findings so far, Dr. Collins?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very clear. Lot and Abraham were hanging out over at Bethel and Ai.
Yeah.
And Lot looked up from that location and looked eastward and saw the whole city, the whole Kikar, the circle of the Jordan. The word Kikar doesn't mean plain or valley. It means a circle or a disc. He saw that whole circle of the southern Jordan Valley, that circular alluvial plain. And then he traveled eastward from there and pitched his tent near Sodom. And all of that's happening north of the Dead Sea. He never turned south, never looked south. Wow. And by the way, if he had gone south, he'd find nothing down there, because all the cities in the southern part of the Dead Sea were destroyed around 2500 BC, which is centuries before Abraham was ever born.
Amazing. So when you decided that you was going to go in, look for Sodom, and you started finding signs of it, what was the first thing that you actually physically started doing, Dr. Collins? How does it all start? How does it begin?
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, it was theoretical to start with. I mean, we're looking at the text, we're seeing what the text says. All of a sudden we have a map based on the text. Well, a map is one thing, but finding the reality of it's a whole other thing. So we literally had to get on a plane and go to Jordan and actually look on the ground at the locations that we specified from the biblical text. And of course we did that. First thing we did was actually go to Amman, to the American Center of Oriental Research there, and at ACOR, we're researching in their library, looking for reports and surveys and excavation reports that had been done in the past, and all of that is put together, and we come away, all of a sudden, stunningly, we come away with the same picture from that as we came up with from the biblical text.
Yeah, wow.
And because the cities were actually there, so the next thing was to get in a vehicle, head down to the Jordan Valley, and go site to site to site, location to location, looking at each of these, picking up the pottery, doing a surface survey, examining them firsthand. And we had one in particular that had been identified by all the scholars we had read as the largest ruin in the as the largest ruin in the Jordan Valley. And that sort of piqued my interest. Because the Bible always said, Sodom's always mentioned first. It's the only one mentioned by itself, and it's the only one in the story of Genesis 14 whose king has a voice. All those are very important things. Sodom, the Bible says that Sodom is the biggest city north and east of the Dead Sea during the Bronze Age.
Wow.
And at that point, at that realization, it becomes a no-brainer. You look for the largest Bronze Age city northeast of the sea. That's el-Hammam. It's larger by several orders of magnitude. For example, Jerusalem in the same period is 10 acres. Jericho in the same period is 10 to 12 acres. el-Hammam in that period is 62 acres inside the city wall.
Wow.
Not counting what's outside.
And
so it's a gigantic site. It's not just large, it's large by several orders of magnitude over any other city in the region during that same period. So that piqued our interest. We went, we looked at it, we got on the ground. It was absolutely impressive. I'd been excavating in Israel for a long time. I've seen practically, been to every every archaeological site in Israel and Jordan. I'd never seen this one, however, and it just stunned me on how big it was. And also that it had never been excavated. I think that was the biggest shock of all. How in the world did nobody ever excavate this site?
Amazing.
And the fact that it was landmined from the 67 war up through about 1996 probably helped to keep the archaeologists away. But they cleared it of landmines in the late 90s, and I suppose what the minesweepers missed, the sheep and the goats over the next decade or so got. And so anyway, it's all clean. And so when we showed up to really look at it on site for the first time in 2001, it was clean, and we walked all over the place, and it begged to be excavated. I wasn't looking for an archaeological project really at the time, but it just begged to be excavated, and the rest is history.
Wow. What's it like in a local area? Like, how far away are the nearest sort of people living, and what did the local people think of you guys turning up?
That's an interesting question. There are it is sort of out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, except for the fact that the main highway that leads from Amman down to the baptism site in Jordan and into the Dead Sea goes right by it. In fact, they just built a new spur off that highway, which is fabulously large, impressive road, and it runs right in front of our site now.
Oh wow, yeah.
And so it's on the major tourism route for the future.
Yeah.
But it is sort of kind of betwixt and between the small villages. There's a village to the south, there's a village to the north, but it itself is sitting out in the middle of agricultural land.
Mm.
So it really gives you a sense. I mean, when you're standing on top of it and you look around and do a 360, and you see the wonderful agricultural, the green, lush agricultural land around it, you get a real good sense of the well-watered plain of the Jordan and the cities of the plain. So, it sits out there in the middle of nowhere, and the locals, it is the Wild West. Southern Jordan Valley is sort of known as sort of a rough and tumble area, and a lot of drugs run down there. The Bedouin Mafia operates out of there.
Wow.
And but thankfully, the locals embraced us, protect us, watch our back. In fact, they have a long history of protecting American and European explorers and excavators, going all the way back to the 19th century.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
And they know it, and they understand it. I've actually seen the name of their clan mentioned in several books from the 1800s.
Yeah.
And so they kind of pride themselves in watching our back, and they do get in trouble with the Jordanian authorities from time to time.
Yeah.
A shootout here.
Really? Wow.
Drug arrest there.
Yeah.
But anyway, our relationship with the locals has been really, really good. Good. And to sort of the surprise of the Department of Antiquities and others who when they first issued our permit, we're basically thinking, I'm sure, here you can have the permit, but the valley clans are your problem.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the exciting things that you've actually found, Dr. Collins.
Well, whenever you excavate a biblical site that has a lot of play, a lot of pages dedicated to it, you usually have certain things about that site that you would like to find that are actually mentioned in the text.
Yeah.
There were two things that were mentioned in the text, specifically about the city of Sodom, that went immediately to my top two on the top of my desire list.
Yeah.
Number one was the gate.
Yeah.
It says in the chapter 19 and 1 of Genesis, it says that Lot sat in the gateway of Sodom. And so you have a gateway.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you have a fortified city. So the city had to be fortified, but it also had to have a main gateway. And typically in the Middle Bronze Age, which is the time of Abraham, cities had one principal gate. They might have had some postern gates, but had one principal gateway.
Yeah.
And it took us 7 years to find that gateway, but that was the number one on my list.
Wow.
In the first excavations, we did a lot of the fortifications. We did a lot of residential areas. We did the temple area, but I couldn't find the gate. So we kept widening what we call our LA Lower City Trench, and widening that out. Each season it would get 6 to 12 meters wider because we dig in 6 by 6 meter squares.
Yeah.
And so as that thing got wider and wider, eventually we hit the gate. And so, by the way, there's a great book on this put out by Simon & Schuster called Discovering the City of Sodom.
Yeah.
And that's available on Amazon in paperback now. And it's a great read. Reads like a novel.
What evidence did you find of there being a destruction of fire? I know there's been evidence that you found.
Now that was number 2 on the list.
Yeah.
The gate was number 1. And by the way, I told you it took us 7 years to find the gate.
Yeah.
What we found was when we moved down to the lower city, we excavated the first 3 seasons on the upper city. In the fourth season, we went down to the lower city, and we excavated on the lower city for 3 or 4 years before we discovered the gateway.
Yeah.
And what we found out was that we had been eating our lunch on it for 3 years.
That's brilliant.
So we had always parked all of our equipment and ate. Right up. We were sitting right on it.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Anyway, the nature of excavation. You got to dig it to find out what's there. But anyway, the second thing on the list was, of course, in Genesis chapter 19, we have the story of Sodom's destruction by what it says is fire and goprit, or goprit and fire.
Yeah.
Goprit, Hebrew is translated often sulfur, brimstone, which, by the way, it does not mean. It can mean that, but the broad meaning of the word can include lightning. It's translated in the Bible lightning sometimes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But basically, the base meaning of it in the most ancient Semitic languages is burning stone.
Hmm.
And so basically, what it says is, and burning stone and fire came from Yahweh out of the heavens. And so I was looking for some kind of evidence. What kind of evidence would there be of a catastrophic cosmic event?
Yeah.
And other people had described nonsensically, as far as I'm concerned, things like petroleum leaks and gas, natural gas explosions lit by earthquakes and exploding the city. Well, that's nonsense, because that's not what the text says. You got to go with the text. The text says fire and burning stone from Yahweh out of the heavens.
Yeah.
So this thing came cosmically; it didn't come out of the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there should be some evidence of that. And in fact, a long time ago, we actually wrote a piece on airburst events based on what Genesis had said about the city of Sodom's destruction.
Yeah.
And so, make that long story short, we've been taking samples for many years, and a major international team of airburst researchers glommed onto this thing, and they've been intensively working on it now, and they're about ready to publish.
Wow.
To go into a major scientific, peer-reviewed scientific publication.
Yeah. Wow.
And it will demonstrate clearly that the city was actually destroyed by a meteoritic airburst event.
Yeah.
Not only just that city, but 400 square kilometers, and that whole area went offline. Nobody was able to farm there.
How much more is there to find there, Dr. Collins?
Well, let's see. I think I mentioned we excavated in squares that are 6 by 6 meters. So we have the whole site surveyed with 6 by 6 meter squares, and right now we have about 13,000 of those 6 by 6 meter squares on our grid.
Wow.
In 15 years, we've been able to excavate in around 100 of those squares.
Oh, okay. Wow, you're right. Yeah. Wow.
So do the math.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about, we've thus far excavated less than 1% of the site.
Yeah.
But we have seen the palace. We have seen, we're excavating the palace now for the third year. We've seen the temple area. We've seen much of the fortifications. So we've sampled the site quite extensively.
Yeah. My next question was going to be, do you have plans to go anywhere else and try and find anything else? But you're going to be there for the next 500 years, aren't you?
Yes, people said that. Yeah, I could, maybe Jesus, maybe the Lord will let us continue to excavate there in the millennium, with better techniques.
Oh, brilliant. If any of the listeners would like to sort of log on, I know you've got a very informative newsletter that you publish every week, haven't you? And you've got a website as well. Tell the listeners how they can sort of keep in touch and how they can support you guys as well, Dr. Collins.
Yes, we do have a website. It's just digsodom.com. That's a pretty easy way to find it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's el-Hammam.com, but nobody knows how to spell it.
We'll stick with Dig Sodom, yeah.
Dig Sodom's easier. We also have, now I don't know if this works in the UK, but for people here in America, if they text Dig Sodom as one word, just Dig Sodom, and text that to 22828, it'll give you instructions. I don't know how that works internationally.
Oh, okay.
But let me say this: if people just go onto the website and then, in fact, they can go to the TSU website, or in fact, they can email us. And that's really easy. Go to the Trinity Southwest University website, and that's just trinitysouthwest.com, and they can email me or Glenda in my office, and we'll put you on the email update list. Just say, hey, I want to be on the THEP update list, on the Sodom update list. So
brilliant.
And so that newsletter goes out several times a month, and then during the dig season, during the 8 weeks from late January to end of March, it comes out every single day, and it just follows the dig every day. We talk about what's happening that day, photographs, what discoveries are being made. So it's fun to follow. It's real educational too.
Brilliant. And I'll put the details in the description below as well, so make it easy for everyone to sign up. Dr. Collins, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating.
Well, we appreciate you allowing us to get the information out. It's very helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Collins. If you enjoyed that, I really recommend that you go to the website www.digsodom.com. Team have some fantastic resources and they do brilliant updates. Really worth keeping on top of that. There are also opportunities for you to actually go to Sodom and help out with the rest of the team. The information for that is also available on the website, and wow, what a great opportunity that would be. If you have a question that you would like us to answer on a later episode, please do get in touch. You can contact us via our website www.wearesocialchurch.com, or you can contact us on any of our social media channels. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye for now.